Hi folks, and welcome to episode 5 of the Brighton Jazz School podcast. Firstly, I'd just like to apologise if I come across as slightly overexcited. I've recently discovered, just today in fact, some amazing footage on YouTube of Phineas Newborn Jr. and my piano teacher James Williams, and it's quite something for me to see that. So check it out for yourself, YouTube. If you type in Phineas Newborn Jr., then I'm sure you'll be able to find it. Or failing that, go to my Facebook profile, Wayne McConnell, if you type in there. If I'm not friends, then by all means add me. Anyway, so we've got a packed show for you. We've got guest interview is the amazing Joe Hunter. Now, if you don't know Joe, if you don't know who he is, please pay special attention to this podcast because we're going to feature one of his tracks at the end. He really is the most lyrical trumpet player you're ever likely to hear. And he won't mind me saying this, but he's got a few years on him, so he's got a lot of experience in playing with some great people. Jack Parnell, he even did a session with Billie Holiday when he was, I think, about 18 or 19. But it's a fantastic interview, so we'll look forward to that a bit later on. As I said, we're going to feature a track that Joe plays on live from the Brunswick, so that's a bit later on as well. We also got the album of the week is The Real McCoy by jazz pianist McCoy Tyner. One of my favourites, so that's a great one. The student spot this week, we're looking at, or we did look at, I should say, chordal harmony in the Learn to Play class, so more on that later. And in the Learn to Listen, we were checking out the Miles album, Birth of the Cool, and really sort of the beginning of the cool period, the West Coast period of jazz. So that's about it. So I hope you stay tuned. As ever, leave comments on the Brighton Jazz School forum, www.brightonjazzschool.com. We now have a Facebook page dedicated to the podcast, and it would be really great if you could go on there and just click on like on that page. That would be really, really helpful. I'm trying to basically just up the level of awareness of the podcast in the online world and try and get it out there a bit more, get some more listeners. So if you could click on like, share it around on your profiles, that would be great. Tweet it, whatever you want. Any social networking sort of advertising is great, and I'll be really appreciative of that. So sit back, relax, whether you're on your way to work or whether you're relaxing after work, if you're on the train or if you're driving, whatever. But as ever, thanks for joining us, and keep in touch through brightonjazzschool.com. Hello and welcome to Album of the Week. This week we're taking a look at The Real McCoy by jazz pianist McCoy Tyner. A real powerhouse album recorded just after he left John Coltrane's quartet in 1967. It was released on Blue Note, and it features some of the great players of that period. Joe Henderson on the tenor saxophone, Ron Carter on the double bass, and the powerhouse Elvin Jones on drums. Now, I remember very, very distinctly when I first heard this album. I was about, 16, and up until that point I'd been listening to fairly sort of straight-ahead jazz, things like Oscar Peterson, Bill Evans. I hadn't really heard much John Coltrane at that time. And when I heard The Real McCoy, it was like, wow, what is this music? This sort of fresh sound, rhythmically really, really interesting, driving, powerful, spiritual, and yet they had this sort of folk-like melodies using these pentatonic scales, and McCoy using his big fourth chords and reaching down and hitting the fifths. And I was trying to work out what chords they were improvising on, and then it dawned on me there's actually only one chord, so they're improvising on like an F sus chord, but I didn't really figure that out until a few years later, because actually what is happening is that there's superimposing lots of different chords on top of that F tonality, so lots of outside playing, pentatonic playing, fourth playing. So this is something that I didn't really know much about at that time, but it was my window in to that kind of playing. A lot of the sound that comes from Passion Dance has to do with Elvin Jones. He's just a master of texture. I mean, even right from the beginning, it opens with a drum solo, and then they come in with a theme. But even throughout the head, in the different sections of the actual melody, the textures in the drums are quite remarkable. Check them out. It really, really gives another dimension to the whole piece. And of course, his driving swing feel and polyrhythmic feel just gives it the most gorgeous energy. It's just such a positive, impact on the music. I can't imagine what it must have been like to have played with Elvin Jones, but we can hear how much the guys on the album react to the way he plays, because that driving force must be such a great source of inspiration for the musicians. So again, I'm going to refer back to when I first heard the album. I heard the album on and I listened to the theme, not really knowing what to expect, and then McCoy comes in with this solo that starts off using a little fragment of the melody, and then he develops that forward, and it just, everything about it sounds new and fresh. His staccato touch, the way he can kind of play those fourths and play the melody in a really staccato, rhythmic way, really percussive way, is just beautiful. And just the technique that he has to kind of get through those sort of fragments of scales, pentatonic scales, and the way he can play outside is just really, really stunning. And this was the first time that I'd ever heard any piano player like this, so it was a real memorable experience listening to this for the first time. And I've since come back to it, transcribed it, and sort of tried to play like that. And it really is. It's not just playing around with pentatonic scales and fourth chords. There's so much depth to McCoy's playing, and I don't really think he's kind of given the credit that he rightly deserves for his piano playing. I mean, he's one of the most influential pianists around. The sound that he created really helped shape modern jazz piano, and I don't know any piano player, up-and-coming piano player, or really any jazz pianist that isn't influenced by McCoy Tyner. It's just, he was so influential, whether it was in his period with John Coltrane or his Blue Note sort of period. And we could go down the list. Kenny Kirkland, Mulgrew Miller, Jeffrey Keezer, John Hicks, and even some of the older guys like Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea were hugely influenced by McCoy. His conception was so different to everybody else's, and he still is a legend today. If you can see him live, the energy that comes out from his playing is still all there. He's well worth seeing. So do get along. He sometimes plays at Ronnie Scott's, normally a couple of times a year, and it'd be well worth checking him out. So after McCoy's solo, the great Joe Henderson comes in and begins his exploration of the chord. Wow, I mean, just unbelievable. The textures, again, just in general, Joe's style kind of, for me, is an extension of Sonny Rollins. He was sort of coming from the bebop period, rooted in the blues, but just extending harmonically what you could do with the saxophone. And in my view, Joe was one of the great chord changes players. You could hear him play beautiful things over really complex chords, and as well as that, he could play for sustain minutes and minutes and minutes, probably hours if he was allowed to, of interest over long modal tunes. And that's exactly what he does on Passion Dance. Just full of energy, full of just great ideas. I mean, you just get the sense that he could go on forever. And speaking of going on forever, I could talk about this album for hours and hours. We could go through and dissect each track and talk about them, and what we'd end up with is about a 4-hour podcast. So unfortunately I'm not going to do that, but the great thing about this album is that it's so beautifully put together. It really has that sense that it's an album that's been really carefully crafted, and each piece has its own statement individually, but its overall sort of statement as an album collectively as well. So track 2 is Contemplation, which is just stunning. Then we've got 4x5, and then we've got a ballad, Search for Peace, which is just I think one of the most underplayed ballads that we have around. It's just such a gorgeous melody, great chords, it's great to play over. It's got this sort of whole tone thing going on in the bridge. Really stunning, and of course they play it really well, obviously. And then they go out with a McCoy Tyner blues called Blues on the Corner. Now this is another quite a landmark sort of tune, really. It was my introduction to learning a piece that had actually written in fourths, and some of the techniques, some of the concepts that McCoy uses are actually written down in this composition. So that was quite a nice way for me learning to kind of get an idea about how his brain works. It was a good good point to start to go and transcribe some stuff that he did. So Blues on the Corner, that's a great song, and not many people play it, but it's a really great blues. I really wish I could play you some little clips, to highlight what I'm saying here, because it would really make a difference. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to do that because of copyright issues, and if I did, I think PRS would be on my back pretty quickly. So so I really hope you do take it upon yourselves to go and listen to these albums. Most of the albums that I talk about are available for free on Spotify. You can stream them on there and check them out. Research them on the internet, read about them, try and get hold of the liner notes and read those as well. Learn about the history, because that's really important. It tells you where the music comes from and what the times were, and it gives you an insight into perhaps some of the the more artistic choices that these musicians made as a result of how they were living in the times that they were living in. So that's a really important aspect of the music as well. So there we are. That's McCoy Tyner's The Real McCoy. This would be quite a good album to check out if you haven't heard McCoy before, although he did do some really, really great albums before this one. In particular, a trio album called Inception, and also a Duke Ellington album. I think it's McCoy Plays Ellington, and quite a few others. Reaching Forth is another one. Really, really great albums. But this period is a good example of his playing sort of straight ahead, but just reaching into those dark sort of fourthy areas before he went really, really kind of modal and spiritual. I'm thinking later albums like Atlantis with Albert Alia and some of those other great albums that really explore drones and long sections of texture of one chord and really, really powerful kind of improvising over the top. So this is a bit more sort of changes playing, but it's just a great period in McCoy's long life as a musician. So I urge you to check some of those earlier recordings out as well. So that's it for this week. That was Album of the Week. Please leave your comments and suggestions in the Brighton Jazz School forum, brightonjazzschool.com/podcast, and then you can reach the forum there. If you disagree with anything I say, or I get any fact wrong, please, or dates wrong more likely, please write in and tell me, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to hear from you. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Album of the Week. Hi guys, and welcome to the guest artist interview. This week we're in for a real treat. We've got the fantastic Joe Hunter, absolutely brilliant trumpet player, lovely to play with, really, really, really lyrical, just beautiful player, and I'm really happy that he can join us here for this interview. So thanks Joe, thanks for being here with us. I'd like to start at the beginning. What made you start music? What was the interest in music? How did you get started?
My father was a great fan of all the classics, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky and all that. And somehow I learned to play the bugle at school. And I was a bugler, playing bugle calls, at a military academy.
Right, okay. And eventually you gravitated towards jazz. How did you discover jazz?
Well, I came out of the army. I was mad about jazz. I bought a book by Dizzy Gillespie. And literally sort of learned his solos as much as I could. And joined a jazz group and started to play the tunes, the old bebop tunes of that day,
Mm-hmm.
And gradually it happened. God knows how. I mean, today, I really am lost for improvisation. I feel too old and played out. I just don't know what to play anymore. But in those days, everything was new and exciting.
Yeah. Well, let me just start by saying, when we hear you play, it's an absolute joy, and there's so much depth in your playing and meaning. Especially at jam sessions, you don't often hear lots of just lovely lyrical playing, and that certainly comes through when you play. It's an absolute joy to hear you play. Did you have any formal training, classical sort of training on the trumpet and bugle? Or?
Yes, I went to the Royal College of Music.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I learned much there, especially about jazz.
Yeah.
It was about exercises and how to avoid consecutive fifths and octaves and stuff like that.
Sure.
Then I went in the army, and that was all squashed. But in the army, I joined a little group and we played tunes. I was mad about Harry James.
Harry James, yeah.
Played tunes like da 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 da. What's it called? I can't remember.
I'm beginning to see the light.
That's it.
Yeah. Great tune. Do you have any other favourite tunes that you like to play? Favourite ones? I guess it changes all the time, but...
Oh, dozens of them, yes.
Yeah.
I've got a whole list at home.
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned Dizzy Gillespie earlier on. How much of an influence was he on your trumpet playing?
Tremendous. We all started off copying his phrases and doing all those tiddly bits and trying to... Of course, you can never get high enough for Dizzy. He has a tremendous range.
Yeah.
All of us trumpet players were rather limited in that field, but he was a tremendous influence. Of course, Charlie Parker, his associate.
Yeah. Did you ever see those guys play live?
No, I didn't. No, lots of my contemporaries, like Johnny Dankworth, got a job on the boats. They went to New York and Ronald Scott. I actually heard them in the flesh.
Yeah. And aside from bebop, who are some other players that you're influenced by? Because I really get a sense of like the lyrical side. Is that something that you've particularly worked on, or you've got a very singing-like quality in the way you play?
Well, as I say, I started off trying to copy Harry James, and I suppose it sort of melted down from there. Lots of people come up and say, "You sound like Big Spiderback," which I'm my player not really familiar with.
Yeah,
but. I said, thanks very much. I'm trying to imitate Harry James.
Yeah, that's great. And Joe, can you talk about some of the people that you've played with over the years? Some people that have really inspired you, and I'm sure you've inspired them.
Well, I'm racking my brains. I've played with Kenny Graham, and I played with Roy Fox, and... the big bands of the day. Jack Parnell, of course.
Yeah.
And, but as I say, none of those bands actually influenced my playing. My playing was always just on the romantic side, and going back to Harry James,
Yeah.
What a player.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and not really recognised as much as he should.
No.
Especially with the younger players today. You tend to the Wynton Marsalis. Is they seem to be all listening to him, and Roy Hargroves. I mean, do you keep up with the sort of young trumpet players? Do you know some of those names?
I'm afraid I don't actually. Conte Gonzoli was the last one.
Oh yeah.
And he was influenced by Harry James.
Yeah.
Because he never played like him. And I have met trumpet players of my. Friends of mine who said they don't like him, don't like Harry James.
Really?
Because Harry James can be very schmaltzy.
Yeah.
And over the top,
Sure.
I don't want to start imitating.
Yeah.
But,
great sound, though.
Yeah.
Great sound, very expressive sound.
Oh, there are dozens of trumpet players that I should know. So.
Yeah. And I understand that you did a session with Billie Holiday.
Well, I must admit, yes. Years ago, when I first came out of the army, that was one of the first jobs with Jack Parnell that I had. We went to the Albert Hall, and who should we have to accompany but Billie Holiday? And I was only a little raw kid who didn't know B flat from C, and she complained, that we didn't know her tunes, we didn't know her keys. And I must admit that she was right. We didn't. At least I didn't.
Yeah. But what a great, even to be in the same room as her. That must have. Were you familiar with her singing kind of before the session, or?
No, I never knew anything about Billie Holiday.
Sure. Yeah. Have you done any teaching or anything like that?
No.
Not really. Okay.
The only teaching I did was for a young kid, and I turned around and said. I was demonstrating for him. I turned around and he was copying me. The cheeks running out, which was all wrong,
Really?
So I never got any jobs.
That's brilliant. So what do you think about the state of jazz today, especially in the UK? I mean, do you think it's a sort of healthy scene? I mean, I know here in Brighton it seems to be pretty healthy, but what do you make of pop music and things like that on the radio?
I must admit I don't like pop music, except the pop music of the 70s. Mm-hmm. I've got a romantic frame of mind, I'm afraid. I love Diana Ross and all that. So.
Great.
And who's the other one? Never mind.
Yes, actually, I remember having a conversation with you about that Donald Fagen.
Oh, Donald Fagen, yeah.
Nightfly, that album.
Yeah.
That's great. So you've got a very eclectic taste, in that sense. Classical music, jazz, the 70s pop thing, R&B almost.
Yeah.
The blues, have you ever studied or, tried to imitate the great blues players?
I must admit I haven't. I like tunes.
Mm-hmm.
The blues, I sort of flannel around, if there's a blues chorus comes up.
Yeah.
I do the 3 chords.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Okay, thanks, Joe. I'd just like to ask you the infamous last question, which is, have you got any tips for improvisation for younger musicians coming up? Any advice you can offer them about playing?
Well, is to, I would say, listen to the records you like and actually copy the solos till you can play them, which takes some doing.
Yeah.
And once you've copied the solos, you may be in a position to depart from the actual solo and branch out on your own.
Yeah.
But that is the way to start.
Absolutely. Copy.
I can't think of any other way to start,
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on, and that's certainly how we approach things in the jazz school, rather than teach. A lot of places teach the theory first and then expect the student to kind of fathom out how to turn that into music, and I think that's the wrong way of doing it. I sort of see jazz as a language, and the first thing we do learning a language is to copy, and I think that's by far the best approach. And all the great musicians such as yourself that I've spoken to about this subject have all said exactly what you've said. So there you go, listeners. That's directly from Joe Hunter here. So copy the records, listen to what you like, and then deviate from there.
Don't get pissed.
And don't get pissed. Brilliant. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for joining us. And it's a pleasure to meet you and talk to you, and I look forward to playing with you again. Okay, welcome to the student information section. I'm still at a loss to what to call this. I really don't like student information. It sounds a little bit drab, so I don't know if you've got any ideas. Please email me and let me know. So in this section, this is where I give a heads up about what we've been up to in both the Learn to Listen and the Learn to Play course. So starting with the Learn to Play, this week we were looking at the quartal harmony. Now, quartal harmony is basically harmony that's made up of fourths, and this is a technique that was popularized by McCoy Tyner in the mid-60s, when he was working with John Coltrane. Also, people like Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea used those concepts, but really Bud Powell was using this in the sort of late 40s. So just to give you an idea about how forward-thinking Bud was, he was using the intervals, fourths, and voicing chords in that method way back then. So quite impressive. But really, McCoy sort of popularized that sound, and that became a big part of his concept. Okay, so what I tried to do was build in some of the things that Paul Richards said last week. We had Paul come and give a little talk on practicing, creative ways of practicing, which was really, really excellent, and it gave a lot of the students some brilliant ideas on how to take a really small concept or even something like a scale and just really practice it and maximize that amount of material that you can really practice, no matter how small it is. So his method was take a scale and then formulate these rhythmic groups where you can practice against a metronome. So groups of like 2 note or 1 note to start with, then groups of 2, then groups of 3, groups of 4, groups of 5, and then so on. So what you end up with is quite a variety of rhythmic interpretations of that particular scale. And so I've really adapted, well, just taken that concept but applied it to fourths. So I've started with exercise 1, which uses groupings of 2 rhythmically. Now we're trying something different here for the very first time on the podcast. I'm attempting to play the piano while this is recording. So this is me playing live to try and illustrate some of these examples. So this is the first exercise, and it utilizes the interval of a fourth using groupings of 2 rhythmically. Okay, so obviously you can take that and you can practice that in a few different keys. It's pretty mundane, it's not the most musical thing, but what I really want you to do is just to establish the sound of the fourth interval, get that really solidly into your head, and then play around with the shape. So here is exercise 2. This is using the interval of the fourth again, but this time using groupings of 3. So there you go. You can use that and practice that in a few different keys, just to get the idea of the fourth interval in your head, and also get the feel of playing the fourth, because it's not the easiest thing on piano. I believe it's quite easy on guitar, but just get the feel of it on your instrument. Okay, exercise 3 using the interval of a fourth, but then this is groupings of 4. So what you can do is basically go as high as you like. You try groupings of 4, 5, and 6. Obviously, the higher up you go, the more range you're using on your instrument. So that might get quite difficult for horn players and singers if you're grouping, 5 or even 4 is quite hard. 4 perfect fourths in a row. That spans quite a few notes there. So that might be a bit difficult. So I went up to 5. I'm not going to play through all of them. But it gets quite interesting when you use arrangements of 2 different types of groupings. So, for example, in this one, I'm going to be using groupings of 2 and 3. So that's quite interesting, creates a bit of rhythmic variety. Again, you can play these in different feels, different styles. Don't just be limited to sort of eighth notes. You can change the rhythmic elements there, as I did a bit. Just experiment with them. The most important thing is that you're creative with your practice. Okay, so let's have a look at the last one. This is a grouping of 3 notes and then 2 notes. And so on. So the important thing is, don't rush these exercises. Just play through them, transcribe them. I'm pretty reluctant to write these out. They all start on the note C, concert C. So see if you can work them out. Obviously we're just dealing with fourths, so they should be pretty easy to work out. And just use them as warm-up exercises, as part of your scale practice or whatever. Try both hands if you're a pianist. What I would advise you not to do is to try and fit these in. These are not licks. These are not sort of this isn't material for you to actually put into your improvising. This is just to get you familiar with the sound of the fourths. So it's sort of an exercise. You want to build this into your technical exercises to become familiar with just playing the interval of the fourth in different ways and varying the rhythm there. So don't force them into your improvising. And as ever, always practice with a metronome. Make sure you get a nice even sound. Practice them in different articulations. Koi Tyner usually executes these with a very staccato sort of touch at the piano, which is very, very effective, especially during the sort of faster runs and things. So experiment with that. Like I said, don't rush through them. Practice them in a few different keys. And keep it creative, and it will all come out in your playing naturally. So in the Learn to Listen class this week, we were checking out the great recordings that Miles did for Prestige in the mid-50s. So I'm talking about the albums Cooking, Relaxing, Working and Steaming. Absolute treasures of albums, recorded in 1956, as I said. These albums were really the last albums that he recorded for Prestige, And as I understand it, Columbia or Georgovakian actually brought Miles out. So he really wanted to not work with Prestige anymore. I think it had something to do with the poor pay for the royalties. But nevertheless, these were absolutely fantastic recordings. And we started off by checking out My Funny Valentine and Blues by Five on the album Cooking. And he's in fine company. John Coltrane on tenor saxophone. We've got Red Garland on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and the great Philly Joe Jones on drums. And in my view, one of the best rhythm sections ever in the world. So it's an absolute pleasure to listen to these. So I hope you go and check them out. We then checked out Relaxing, a really great album full of different styles of numbers, really. We have a nice mix of ballads, light swingers, and some up-tempo bebop numbers as well. A really great mix. Miles really started to use the muted trumpet sort of around this period, and beautiful renditions of If I Were a Bell, You're My Everything, and Coltrane again, just an amazing soloist on those. And then Miles enters with his lovely Harmon mute sound, and I think pays special attention to Philly Joe's brushwork. It just really sort of encases the whole ballad in this great sort of swirl of lush brushwork. Really stunning. We checked out 4 as well, which is a Miles classic, just a great version of that. We then moved on to Steaming, which was the last of those classic 4 albums to be recorded, and we checked out Sorry with the Fringe on top, Salt Peanuts, and the very romantic When I Fall in Love. I think that's one of the most beautiful versions I've heard, actually, of Miles playing that. And they've recently just released, I think it's a 14 box CD set of all some live recordings of their time in that band together, live at the Cafe Bohemia, which also featured Miles was working with Sonny Rollins and Horace Silver just before this band got together. So there's some great tunes featuring that band, and outtakes as well, not outtakes, but alternative takes of tracks, which they're just trying out different textures. It's really interesting to hear how Miles can kind of change the sound of each tune. And sometimes, the outtakes, there's one outtake, another version of 4, which I thought was better than the one that they put on the album. But anyway, it's really interesting historically to listen to some of those as well. But I guess they're all available on Spotify. So yeah, check out that. Miles, Relaxing, Steaming, Working, and Cooking. Absolute jazz classics. So that's about it for now for the student area, student spot, student information, whatever we're going to call it. Please do write in. I've been racking my brains. I can't think of anything decent to call it. So open to suggestions there. Yeah, I hope you enjoy the new played examples. I think that will hopefully bring things home a bit more so you can hear what we're talking about. And it's really pretty easy for me to do. I hope the quality of the piano sounds okay. As ever, leave your comments, questions, whatever, at the Brighton Jazz School Forum. Thanks again for joining us, and join us again next week. We hope you enjoy the rest of the show, and indeed your day or evening or middle of the night or your bath or your bus journey or your train journey. Alright guys, so that's about it for this week. Just before we end, and I pass you over to the great Joe Hunter for his rendition of a song that I know you all love and have probably heard before, but I doubt you've heard it played like this. I'd just like to do a few shout outs. First of all, thank you to you, the listeners, for checking in with us. It makes my job really worthwhile. Thank you to my students for being amazing. I love teaching you guys on a week-to-week basis, and we have a few laughs, and we have highs and lows, but we kind of get through things together, and there's a real sense of community with what's happening with BJS. Hopefully that's strengthening the overall jazz scene here in Brighton. Now with the podcast, hopefully that's, maybe going a bit further afield. So a special thanks to Jake, who has been really inspiring. I had a meeting. Jake's an amazing entrepreneur, and he was giving me some advice about how to move Brighton Jazz School forward, and it really was an amazing session. So Thanks to you, Jake. And as ever, thank you to my guest, the glue of Brighton Jazz School, kind of, formulating ideas and sort of running them by each other and bouncing ideas off of each other. And also creating this podcast. It's really quite amazing what he does. And we've got a really big concert coming up on the 24th of March. It's the Brighton Jazz School Student Showcase concert. We're also featuring the great Verona Chard. Now, she's a fantastic jazz singer. If you haven't heard her, really try and check her out. She collaborates a lot with Claire Martin. She's worked with Gareth Williams, the piano player, stroke singer, and loads of great, amazing people. She's a wonderful person, and she'll be joining us on the 24th for this charity event, which I'll tell you a little bit more about closer to the time. But she's going to be there in person and singing a couple of tunes with me. So we hope you can join us. 24th of March. Tickets are £8. All the money is going to Lynn Hazelden, who's, if you don't know Lynn, she's an amazing person on the Brighton sort of local scene here. Really supportive of Brighton Jazz School. And she's done so much charity work for some amazing charities, Peace in Our Lifetime. And now she's set up this charity that Kinder Choices, which helps people suffering with cancer to use alternative therapies that are kinder to your body. So, just a much more less aggressive approach to treating this horrible disease. And we've got lots and lots of goodies to give away and sell. We've got various raffles and things going on, all in order to raise money for patients who also are in a similar position to Lynn. So again, she's in this very delicate medical condition at the moment, and yet she still manages to give the time and give money to other people that need the help. So it's really inspiring, and I'm really honoured to be helping Lynn out for this great cause. So I hope you feel the same, and please join us 24th of March at the Brunswick. From doors open at 1 p.m, tickets £8. Bring as many people as you can. So thank you very much, and this is Wayne signing out. I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of the very fine gentleman, Mr. Joe Hunter.
Joe Hunter, everyone.